I sat at that dinner table listening to my mother tell my entire extended family that I was the unambitious child, the one who just couldn't seem to get their life together like my sister, while I was literally holding the deed to the roof over her head in my pocket. Have you ever sat across from someone you love while they tore your dignity to shreds, knowing you held a nuclear secret that could destroy their entire reality in a single sentence? I need you to tell me honestly after you hear this whole mess. Was I wrong for letting her humiliate herself before I dropped the truth? Or did she get exactly what she deserved for treating me like a second-class citizen in my own family? This whole nightmare didn't start at that dinner, though. It started years ago in the quiet, suffocating way that family dynamics usually rot from the inside out. My mother, Diane, has always had a favorite, and it wasn't me. My sister, Chloe, is what you'd call a trophy daughter. She went to a prestigious university, got a high-profile job in PR, and married a guy who looks like he stepped out of a luxury watch catalog. To my mother, Chloe is the gold standard of human existence, while I've always been the artistic one, which is Diane's code for the disappointment. I work in data analytics and do some freelance consulting on the side. It's not flashy, it doesn't involve red carpets or fancy titles, but it pays incredibly well. However, because I don't wear a suit to work, and I prefer my quiet apartment to a high-rise condo, my mother assumed I was barely scraping by. About 3 years ago, my parents started hitting a rough patch, or so they told me. My dad had been forced into early retirement, and my mother's spending habits didn't adjust to the new reality. They were living in this massive 4-bedroom colonial house that they couldn't afford to heat, let alone pay the mortgage on. One night my dad called me, sounding smaller than I'd ever heard him. He confessed they were months behind on the mortgage, the property taxes were delinquent, and the bank was starting the foreclosure process. He begged me not to tell my mother he'd called, but he didn't know where else to turn. Chloe, despite her high-profile life, was buried in credit card debt and a lifestyle she couldn't actually maintain, so she wasn't an option. I had been saving for a down payment on my own place, but looking at my dad's desperation, I couldn't let them lose their home. Over the next 36 months, I secretly funneled exactly $61,000 into their accounts. I paid off the back taxes, caught up the mortgage, and even paid for a new HVAC system when theirs died in the middle of winter. I did it all through my dad, under the strict condition that we keep it a secret because I knew how my mother was. She has this toxic pride where she needs to feel superior to everyone, especially me. If she knew I was the one saving her, she'd either resent me or find a way to make it my fault. So, for 3 years, I lived a modest life, driving my old sedan and skipping vacations, while my mother continued to brag about Chloe's newest designer bags that I knew Chloe was buying on credit while I was literally keeping the lights on for our parents. Every time I went over for Sunday dinner, I'd listen to my mother talk about how some people just don't have the drive to succeed. While she served food I had paid for on a table I had saved from the debt collectors. It was an exhausting, thankless existence, but I did it for my dad. Then came the celebration dinner last week. My sister had just been promoted to a senior VP role, and my mother wanted the whole family there to witness her crowning achievement. The table was set for 12 aunts, uncles, cousins, all of them there to bask in Chloe's reflected glory. I showed up in my usual jeans and a sweater, and the moment I walked in, I could feel the judgment radiating off my mother. She didn't even say hello. She just looked me up and down and sighed, "Well, at least you're on time for once." As the dinner progressed, the wine flowed, and so did my mother's tongue. She started making these subtle jabs at my lifestyle. She talked about how proud she was that Chloe actually made something of herself, and how blessed she was to have at least one child who understood the value of hard work. I tried to ignore it. I really did. I just focused on my mashed potatoes. But then, my Aunt Sarah asked me how my work was going. Before I could even open my mouth, my mother chimed in with a sharp, condescending laugh. She said, "Oh, you know, Sarah, our little failure is just content to drift through life. It's a shame, really. I often wonder where we went wrong with her. She has no house, no husband, and no ambition. It's a good thing Chloe is so successful, otherwise, our family legacy would be quite bleak." The table went dead silent. Even Chloe looked a little uncomfortable, but she didn't defend me. She just sipped her wine. My dad looked at his plate, refusing to meet my eyes. My mother wasn't done, though. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "I just wish you'd be more like your sister. Maybe then you wouldn't be a burden on our minds, wondering if you're ever going to grow up." That was the moment something inside me snapped. The 3 years of sacrifice, the $1,000, the missed opportunities for my own life. It all came rushing up my throat like fire. But before I tell you exactly how I laid out the truth and the absolute chaos that followed, I want you to stop right here. I was sitting there, the secret benefactor of that entire household, being called a failure to my face, in front of everyone I know. What would you have done? Would you have kept your mouth shut to keep the peace for your father's sake? Or would you have burned it all down right there? Drop a comment and tell me if you think I was justified in what I did next, because things are about to get very, very messy. I stood up, slowly, and reached into my bag. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I was perfectly, terrifyingly calm. I pulled out a folder I had brought with me because, ironically, I had planned to show my dad some final paperwork in private after dinner. I opened it and took out the bank statements, the tax receipts, and the itemized list of every cent I had spent to keep that house from being sold at auction. I walked around the table and laid the first paper right next to my mother's wine glass. I told her, "You're right, Mom. I don't have a house of my own. And do you know why? Because I've been paying for yours." She looked at the paper, her face turning a weird shade of gray as she saw the $61,000 total highlighted at the bottom. I started reading the dates and the amounts out loud. November 2022, $10,000 for the mortgage arrears. January 2023, $4,000 for the property tax lien. March 2024, $8,000 for the HVAC system you're currently enjoying. I turned to the rest of the family and said, "My mother thinks I'm a failure, but I'm actually the only reason she isn't living in a 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. Chloe, how much did you contribute to the house fund again? Oh, that's right. You were too busy buying that Prada bag you brought tonight." My mother tried to stammer out a response, saying I was embarrassing her, but I wasn't finished. I looked at my dad and said, "I'm sorry, Dad, but I'm done being the family's secret ATM and public punching bag." I told my mother that since I was such a failure, I would be stopping all financial support immediately. I informed her that the house still had an outstanding balance that I had planned to cover next month, but now that was her problem. The silence at the table was heavy enough to choke on. My aunts and uncles were staring at their plates, the realization sinking in that the successful branch of the family was actually a house of cards held together by the child they all looked down on. I walked out of that house without looking back. Since that night, my phone hasn't stopped blowing up. My mother sent me a flurry of texts alternating between apologizing and accusing me of ruining her reputation by revealing their private business. Chloe called me petty for bringing it up at dinner, to which I replied that she's welcome to take over the mortgage payments if she's so successful. My dad is caught in the middle, heartbroken that the secret is out but unable to deny that I saved them. The aftermath has been a total collapse of the family hierarchy. My mother can't brag about Chloe anymore because everyone knows Chloe did nothing while I went broke to save the family home. They are now facing the reality of having to sell the house because they truly cannot afford the upkeep without my monthly donations. I feel a strange mix of guilt and absolute liberation. I've realized that being the good child meant setting myself on fire to keep people warm who didn't even like the smell of the smoke. I've officially cut off the money, and for the first time in years, I'm looking at listings for my own place. I learned the hard way that you can't buy respect from people who are determined to see you as beneath them. If there's a lesson here, it's that your worth isn't defined by the labels your family slaps on you, and sometimes the only way to move forward is to let the people who treat you like a failure deal with the consequences of their own reality. If you think I was right to expose the truth, hit that like button and let me know in the comments. I'm curious to see if you think I should have kept the secret, or if the truth was the only way out. Subscribe for more stories where the quiet one finally finds their voice, and share your thoughts on this whole mess below. I'll see you all in the next story.